I think you ought to know about men's radio. The place where men and women really speak. Oh man, what a show. It's men's radio. This crazy show is on 3 times a week. Now Russ and Phil are there to help with all your cares. We laugh, we cry, we talk like grown-ups do. But if you're sad and low, it won't cost you no dough. And radio, that's the place for you. With Russ Kane and Phil Dave.
Fantastico. Welcome, everybody. I'm Russ Kane. This is the Daily Show exclusive to Men's Radio Station. It's Friday, the 10th of November. I don't know where the year's going. I've got a month and a half to finish my next novel. No pressure. No pressure whatsoever. Yeah. Poppy. I was looking everywhere to go and buy a poppy because it's something I hugely believe in. And also, it's one in the face for everybody says, it's a symbol for this. It's a symbol. No, it's not. Shut up. If you don't like it, just go away. And I think it's magnificent. And eventually, finally, I had to have a meeting, and I went over to St. John's Wood. And there in the tube station was the same guy. He's been there for 22 years, apparently. And it was great. And I got this thing. But I said to him, I've been looking everywhere to try and buy a poppy, and I just couldn't. Anyway, Barry J. Allen. Oh, flash. Hello to you, Barry. Right. Big news, big excitement. Love this guy, but he's got a big announcement to make. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our very own theatre critic, Mr. First Night himself, Jonathan Baz.
Well, thank you.
How are you? How are you? I want to hear this big news.
Well, the big news today is
the big news is if you could come a bit nearer to your microphone, that would be fantastic.
Great.
There we
go. No, I'm delighted after serving a ridiculously long apprenticeship to now be part of the esteemed critics circle of the United Kingdom.
Now, what does that mean? What does that actually mean? Because I know it's a big deal.
It means it's an organisation that I've been invited to join, and it's made up of effectively of my professional peers, most of whom, not all, but most of whom I look up to with immense respect. I'm rather chuffed to have been asked to join that group of people. So,
Jonathan, do you have to be invited, or do you apply like Blockbuster's Video Club? I mean, how does it?
It's an invitation. It's an invitation. Oh, wow. They reviewed a body of my work. I'm guessing, presumably, after a good few glasses of Malbec, that would have helped.
That helps everything.
And assuming they were still awake when they got to the end of what I'd written. It appeared to have met with their approval, so I'm jolly chuffed.
This is great news.
Yes, I'm pleased.
This is great news. Well done, Jonathan Baz.
And it's marked sort of the end of really what has been I'll describe it a week that's been a fabulous sandwich between two fabulous slices of bread. The filling was okay, but my week began and ended really very nicely. And of course, this week began on Sunday afternoon in Jermyn Street, where I found myself watching a strange one-man comedy show, Unwise but Not Illegal, presented by a certain Russ Kane.
What was that like? I couldn't get a ticket.
It was, sadly, neither could I almost. It was excellent. Jolly good. And remind me, Russ, I'm still waiting for that $50 bill that you said would be in my copy of the programme.
No, what you said was 50 lira. And that was there. I'm a bit surprised.
But it was
thank you very much.
And thank you very much for coming along. As and when you ever plan to take it further on the road, to everyone who's listening, go buy tickets. It was a great show, really funny, really entertaining. So well done to you, sir.
You're very kind. Thank you. The weird thing is, I've just got to jump in because people must think I'm terribly rude. Well, they may do anyway, but I'm past caring. I'm only today seeing on Facebook people saying some very nice things, which they obviously posted ages ago, and it's come up on my timeline this morning. I've tried to reply to everybody. Please don't think I was ignoring you. It just didn't come up. I have no idea what the algorithms were doing, but accept my apologies. Really, it wasn't me. It was the algorithms of the Zook. Enough from me. What have you seen, JB?
So, elsewhere, what's been on? A new play at the Park Theatre in Finsbury Park, one of London's fringe off West End venues, which often puts on stuff that is excellent. And of course, because it's off West End, the prices are realistic and affordable and don't require a double mortgage to go and take
it's madness, isn't it? If you don't live in London, Jonathan, could you just spend a moment and explain to people, especially those watching abroad in America and in Spain and everywhere, what sort of price can you expect to pay for a West End London theatre show?
Look, it's very, very interesting because the ticket prices as advertised are often for a decent seat, easily into 3 figures. And you can be paying 60 quid to be sat up in the gods with a pillar in front of you. That can happen. What I should also say, Russ, is that frequently at many shows, and I'll reference here, in fact, even Crazy for You, which I think is one of the best musicals in town at the moment. I was chatting to some friends recently who said they'd gone in on some very, very cheap ticket deals. So if you know where to look, there are deals to be had. But you're right. If you want to plan a trip in advance to the theatre, if you want to take your other half or your best friend or your family for an afternoon out and then a meal or something, it's going to cost a lot of money to have those tickets booked and that theatre trip planned.
It's bonkers.
It is. It's a lot of money. Anyway, the play that I saw at the very lovely Park Theatre was a new play by a chap called Jonathan Maitland called The Interview. And it's all about that interview that Diana, Princess of Wales, gave to Martin Bashir. And I've got to be honest, the play itself does not add a great deal to what we already know from the tabloid press, from television, etc., etc. I feel Jonathan Maitland, bless him, has really skimmed the content. It's entertaining. As I say, it doesn't teach you much about what you don't know. And rather disappointingly, it ends with sort of a postscript from the spirit of Diana, sort of resenting the fact that Prince William has requested that the Panorama interview never be broadcast again. And she's saying, this is awful, my voice has been muted forevermore, which I feel was an unnecessary piece of bias, for want of another word, from Maitland. However, one of the redeeming features of this show is it's been very, very well directed by a chap called Michael Fentiman, for whom I have an awful lot of time, top chap. And the woman who plays Diana is an actress who I'd not heard of before, a woman called Yolanda Keppel. And her take on Diana is outstanding. Her voice has been coached immaculately, and sadly, I haven't got the name of the voice coach in front of me, but the voice coaching and her wig and costuming are extraordinary. And yes, of course, her face is her own. Her face is Yolanda's. It's not Diana's face, but her mannerisms and her style and her vocal work is off the scale. And I have to say, the guy who plays Bashir as well, equally, listen, none of us really know Bashir other than those glimpses that we've seen of him in the interview and in various television clips here and there. But that also is nailed very, very accurately. So the acting is good. The direction is good. The script really is a collection of sound bites. It's no more deep than that. And you know, you can probably even get a cheap ticket deal for that, even cheaper than the box office price. But it's an entertaining evening at the theatre, but it's not a must-see by any means.
Jonathan, let me ask you, what is the point of that? It's not a facetious question. What is, if it's just going to be a facile look, we all know the story, why heads didn't roll? Well, it's the BBC. Obviously, they get away with absolutely bloody anything. And the sooner they are defunded, I'm sorry, the better. Absolutely. It is grace what they're doing. They are not fit for purpose. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It should be a subscription service, and that's the end of it. They should not be forcing us to pay their license fee. They don't deserve it. They do. There's some magnificent work there, but we could pay for the sections that we want. And never would I ever listen to BBC News ever again. They can go to hell. Now, what is the point of putting on a play like that? I get it's clever. I get the person playing Diana. It's good. What does it tell us? What does it inform us?
Well, for anyone who's going to see it, who is, typically relatively clued up, it doesn't really inform a great deal. Whether it preaches to the converted of some people who might have a rather cynical view of the royal family, because, of course, Diana had her grievances. And in some instances, her grievances, were not without foundation. But it's a modest hatchet job on the royals. And whilst, as I say, for example, it shows at the end her spirit bemoaning the fact that she's been muted, I would have liked to have seen a bit of balance from being put in by the writer of William and his brother's feelings about, for heaven's sake, our mothers was, the whole thing was brought about by a falsehood. What we've had to endure for these decades, brought about by Bashir's deceit, and some of the pain that we've had to endure. And I appreciate, their parents' relationship was fractured. That's probably a polite way of describing it. I'm not going to go up that path. The point is, Maitland was just particularly one-sided. He has a particularly, let's say, wanting to bash the established side of this country. And I found myself at times bored. Certainly there was nothing in his work that enlightened me or taught me anything that I didn't know. Why was it made? Maybe because it will get bums on seats. Her performance, as I say, Yolanda Kettle, she is excellent. You could say, if you want to see a good performance, it's worth seeing on those grounds alone. It'll certainly give you something to talk about over your cup of tea or your glass of wine after the show, etc. It's theatre. Why it gets made, I can't answer that, Russ.
It's interesting. Now, Graham Pack's got a good. I didn't know about this. The first time I've heard of it. Graham says Jonathan Maitland did another show a couple of years ago at the Park Theatre called The Last Temptation of Boris Johnson. Are you familiar with that?
I was spared that.
Oh, you were spared that. Park Theatre has some decent stuff at reasonable prices. By the way, just to add to what Jonathan...
I'm going to go further than that. I'm actually going to challenge Graham. Park Theatre at times has some excellent stuff at reasonable prices. I've had some of my most stimulating nights of the theatre in Finsbury Park, but also they're capable of putting on the mediocre and the dross as much as any other house. Let me move on.
Have you seen? Let me just put this one up again from Graham. Hi, Jonathan. Because this is a very popular slot that you have, if I may say so. Hi, Jonathan. I saw Sondheim's Old Friends last Saturday. I keep walking past the theatre because I'm in Soho all the time, and enjoyed it. Leah Salonga and Bonnie Langford were great. Bernadette Peters is past her sell-by date. But when I emigrated to America, God, a million years ago, 1976, Bernadette Peters was huge then. So I have no idea how old she is. I mean, I can talk.
She's in her 70s.
Okay.
And I understand what Graham's saying. I chose my words a little more delicately in my review. Largely because, particularly in that show, and it is a great show for the most part, there are people on. She's been given some of the big numbers, Send in the Clowns, for example, there are people on stage in that show who can do some of those songs better than her. I'm not. I mean, Cameron Mackintosh, let's be quite clear, he is a genius. I'm not sure why, though, this genius of theatre production chose to headline the show with Bernadette Peters, who outside the world of theatre cognoscenti, if that's how you pronounce that word, outside the world of theatre cognoscenti, people don't really know who Bernadette Peters is.
No, they won't. She was in sitcom. I mean, I'm going back to 1976 to the 80s when I lived in New York, and she was on some sitcoms then. Well, dear God, it's a long time ago.
She is an absolute empress of Broadway, without question. In London, as I say, outside of the musical theatre bubble, I will say, and some people may shoot me down, people will go, Bernadette who? I saw her in Hello, Dolly, I have to say, a few years ago, where she was terrific as Dolly Levi. And I think Imelda Staunton here will be fabulous next year as Dolly Levi. But yeah, and there was a lovely moment at the end of the first half when all the cast assembled for the song Sunday from Sunday in the Park with George. And Bernadette Peters was the very first dot in that show. I don't know if you ever saw Sunday in the Park with George, Russ.
No.
Okay, it's
I'm not a big Sondheim. I'm going to be an iconoclast here, and you'll probably never speak to me again. I'm not. I know people sort of wet themselves over Sondheim, and it's like. Okay,
it's very cerebral, and you know, we had this discussion. I think it would have been with Phil a couple of weeks ago when I talked about Old Friends. It's you know, his stuff is very. I don't mean this as an insult to you, Russ. His stuff is very intelligent. And
I get that. No, I get that. I just don't particularly like. I mean, like I've tried to watch Sweeney Todd, which everyone raves about. I can't get through it. It's absolutely just.
Sweeney Todd is good fun.
I can't bear it.
Yeah, but it's good fun. And then you get some songs in Sweeney Todd, like A Little Priest, which is absolutely hilarious. Listen to the lyrics and what's sometimes done there, and it's very, very funny. So I would actually say all the plaudits that he's earned for Sweeney Todd, and indeed Sunday in the Park with George, which is really obscure because it's about the work of George Seurat. But many, many years ago, Bernadette Peters was the very first female lead in that show called Dot, because the painting is all about the dot pointillism that George Seurat did. And by a
pointillism.
Pointillism. By a remarkable coincidence, the chap who played George back then was Mandy Patinkin. And I'm going to come on to him because he's doing his one-man show just down the road on Shaftesbury Avenue now for another week or so.
Yes,
so I'll come on to that in a little while. We talked about the interview. The next show I want to talk about is King Lear, which I'll talk about largely because it's a good night out of the theatre, but you won't get a ticket for it because it really is sold out. It's not like one of these shows that says they're sold out, but actually there are tickets left, right and centre that are available. This is Kenneth Branagh, who's done King Lear, and one of my favourite Shakespeare tragedies, if one can have a favourite tragedy. He's taken, unlike the butchers down at Shakespeare's Globe, who don't only chop the script, they then rewrite it and add in their own bollocks. Sorry, am I allowed to say that?
You can say bollocks as much as you like, especially if people think they're going to rewrite Shakespeare because they're better than he was. The sheer arrogance of that is stunning.
What Branagh has not done is rewrite any of it. He has taken quite a brutal chopping axe to the script. Most of the great quotes are still there, and he's really filleted out a lot of the facts, kept the key core plots about King Lear, who's got a pretty bad relationship with his daughters, and another chap called Gloucester, who's got a bad relationship with his sons. I thought it was a banging production, really, really good. I mean, it was a shame. One of the lines that Branagh has cut when his daughters died, who's been a really lovely little girl, and he says her voice, shame that she's dead, her voice was soft and gentle, which is an excellent thing in woman. Often feminists have been up in arms that Shakespeare could be so outrageously chauvinistic in that line. That line has been chopped.
Yeah, because he wasn't born in 2023. It's amazing, isn't it, Jonathan? He was born in Elizabethan times. By the way, Graham Pack, nice gag, but it was Steps, not S Club 7.
Continue. If you can get a ticket and you like King Lear, then unlike a number of my critic friends, I really enjoyed it. He's boiled it down from 3 hours plus to 2 hours. He's kept in the key bits of the story. When this poor chap Gloucester has his eyes ripped out by his daughter and her husband, it's wonderfully gory. And I've got to be honest, any play that goes to town and has eyeballs bouncing across the stage, complete with blood and gore and optic nerves, that to me is worth an extra star, because Shakespeare wrote that bit for the blood and guts, and Branagh has delivered it in spades.
And is there any big tap numbers in it?
No, just some really bouncing bits when these
bouncing. There's no bouncing feet, but there's bouncing eyeballs. I get it. Okay.
It's good. Like I say, you're not going to get a ticket. There might be some day tickets available. It's not everyone's cup of tea. It was my cup of tea. I know the play very well. I really enjoyed seeing it chopped down. He's been great, actually, Branagh, because he's cast it exclusively from RADA graduates, some of whom are really straight fresh out of the school. So he's not gone for star-studded names beyond himself. And I think it works. So if you're able
I've got to say, I'm a big fan of Kenneth Branagh. By chance, I met him once, and we just had a tiny little chat several years ago, and he was utterly nice. He didn't need to be. He didn't know who I was. Why would he? And I like his body of work. I like the stuff he does. I mean, some of it's pure Hollywood nonsense, like Wild Wild West. Some of it's absolutely terrific, but he's a very good actor.
Yeah,
very good. I like him a lot.
And he's taken a really intelligent approach to what is a very long play, and I'd say it's worth seeing. So now, sort of moving on to really good stuff, to talk about really good stuff. Mandy Patinkin, who is as many people will know him from Homeland, which is in fact a program I've never watched.
And Criminal Minds. He was the original guy in Criminal Minds, which lasted a gazillion series. Yeah, and then he left.
So he is 71 years old, massive body of work. Back when Evita opened on Broadway, he was the original Che Guevara. So he's been around.
Princess Bride. The Princess Bride. The greatest thing ever.
He's a very, very talented guy, and he can sing amazingly. And this 90-minute set that he's put together with a very talented pianist, and I'm sort of taking a look at his website. He's on the road almost continually in the United States with this chappie, Adam Ben David, who's his pianist. And it's mainly a lovely whirl through the American songbook, songs written by Frank Lesser, Sondheim. He loves in a little bit of Queen, in fact, with
Jonathan, can I interrupt? Can I interrupt for a second? You know that Shakespeare wrote many tragedies, and you've just described King Lear as a tragedy. May I introduce another modern tragedy? Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Dave. There we go. So
this is what you call better late than never. I do apologise.
It is. Couldn't you get a big poppy, Phil?
Well, I didn't like to show off, you see. So,
look at that.
You know me. I'm the epitome of subtlety. So.
Of course you are, Mr. Low Key. Right, we're talking about Mandy Patinkin, who I go past again. I walk past the theatre several times a week. It looks great. I'm a huge fan of his. He's a very interesting man. I don't agree with his politics, but he's a very interesting guy.
I agree. Sort of taking a look at his web profile, I also don't agree with his political stance on a number of issues. But that doesn't stop me saying that the show he gives is a 5-star gig. It really is. It's only 90 minutes long. That helps. And he drops 2 or 3 anecdotes in amongst the songs. And it's very clear from what he says that he's very proud of his Jewish identity. It pops up from circumcision through to bar mitzvah, family, etc., etc. So there clearly is a real warmth and love that he bears towards his Jewish heritage. The show was fantastic. His penultimate number before the inevitable encore was Being Alive by Stephen Sondheim, which he did wonderfully with Adam Ben David on piano. And then, of course, he comes back for the encore, and he introduces this as a song written by Harold Arlen and Yit Harburg. So everyone immediately goes, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which, of course, was the biggest song that those two wrote. And indeed, Ben David starts banging out the introduction of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Patinkin starts singing, and blow me down, he sings the song in Yiddish, which absolutely... Now, I have to tell you, the bulk of the audience was not Jewish. Quite a few were there. I would say maybe a third-ish, but predominantly, I would say not. But I have to say, my wife and I, who were in the audience for that show, it just destroyed me. Because particularly in the world that we find ourselves in today, with vast amounts of anti-Semitism being promoted on London's streets, and I will say that don't appear to be being addressed by our various agencies.
They're not addressed. They're enabled. They're enabled. They're not addressed.
To have Patinkin celebrating, and I use the word celebrating, albeit in a very mournful song, because Somewhere Over the Rainbow comes with quite a challenging history to it. It was quite uplifting in a way that really was unexpected, and of course sung beautifully and heartbreakingly. And that was how the show ended. Just really a stunning performance. Put the man's politics to one side. Go and see him if you love musical theatre, if you love Manchester Tinkin, for his amazing body of work, which is massive. Go and see it. It is a great evening in the theatre. The final show that I'm going to talk about is
he's a real star, Jonathan, isn't he? I was going to say he is a real star. He's rounded. He's beyond talented, from straightforward acting to musical theatre to, if you can go from The Princess Bride to Criminal Minds to Homeland, he's just awesome. He's an awesome individual. He really is, and very passionate about what he feels. As I said, I don't agree with his politics, but he's passionate. It comes from the heart. He's a huge Biden supporter, etc., etc. Neither here nor there. It's London. Yeah, go on.
The final piece that I want to come on to is Tracy Ann Oberman's Merchant of Venice, which in fact I'm going to be at again tomorrow night. It opened months ago in Watford, was there for a couple of weeks. Then about a month or two ago, then it went to Manchester, who also co-developed the show. Then a couple of months ago, Tracy would have managed to arrange, and her producer would done very well, get the show on tour, where the tour has been long scheduled in theatres' diaries. And then, of course, a little more than a month ago, the horrors of October the 7th took place. And so full disclosure, Tracy is a friend, and chatted to her at various times over recent weeks. And there's a scene in The Merchant of Venice which has Shylock saying, if you prick us, do we not bleed? And Tracy found those words devastating to say, particularly in the early days after the ghastliness of October the 7th. And she's brought the show very much down to, she set it in London, 1936, and the Battle of Cable Street. And she's taken the anti-Semitism of Venice in the 15 or the 1600s when Shakespeare wrote it, and translated that to London in the 1930s when the fascists were seeking to be more strong than thankfully they ever did become. She, of course, has gender swapped, because Shylock has always been played by a man. She actually gender swaps it very well, I will say. And the tour has taken it back into London to the East End. It's got one more night tomorrow night at Wilton. It's got two more nights. It's got tonight as well. Wilton's in the East End. I believe it is sold out, but if one wants to go and try and get a ticket for it, please look. There may still be tickets available. Next week it's at York, then it's at Chichester, then it's at Manchester, and then it's gone for Christmas as the pantomimes fill up all the theatres. And then she's back at the RSC, and incredibly the RSC got behind her in developing this production. So she's taking it back to Stratford-on-Avon towards the end of January. It's a very fresh and innovative take on this troubling tale, unbelievably described as one of Shakespeare's comedies. And if you're able to get a ticket, it's worth seeing. Her performance is sensational.
Thank you very much.
Interestingly enough, Jonathan, before everyone thinks, it was very political, Shakespeare, of course, was a commercial writer. I mean, he wrote to make money. It was a commercial venture. So when Christopher Marlowe wrote The Jew of Malta, and it was a success, Shakespeare, like any other writer, or even like television, which we'll get on with Chantal, when they see what's coming along, what's popular, goes, right, damn, my great rival Marlowe has written The Jew of Malta. I better write a play and have it, because it's obviously a theme, and that's kind of how it came about. So there's always a commercial imperative driving a lot of this art, and everybody wraps it up. Well, Tracy Ann Oberman is one of my heroes. That's all I have to say on it. She's brave, she is courageous, she has been hounded brutally on social media by, well, I'm not going to go into it, you can imagine. And I think she's just a wonderful human being. I've never met her. I certainly want to. We often speak to each other on social media, but I've never met her. And one day I hope I will. Just
and of course, she's currently in Noises Off at the moment.
Jonathan, thank you. Congratulations on your new appointment.
No, she was in Noises Off, Phil.
What was that?
She gone now?
Yeah. Well, she's doing Merchant of Venice. She can't be in two places at once. She was in that Noises Off production. It was fantastic.
I can't keep up with it.
It is good.
He was when I went to go and see it the other week. Let me put it that way. So.
Good. Right. Well, thank you very much, gents.
It's apparent. It's very interesting when she did. Well, thank you, Jonathan, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. And congratulations again on going into the Theatre Critics Inner Circle of Magnificence. There's a very big deal. Jonathan Baz, our very own Theatre Critic. Thanks, Jonathan. What a terrific chat. Well, I've got the gremlins again. I got the gremlins. There we go.
Really?
Right, how are you, Phil Dave? Dare I ask? What's going on? What?
Very well,
no,
thank
shut
you.
Up.
Hopefully you are as well. It's a bit of a case of mind the gap going on with this connection,
yeah, I'm fine.
But other than that, all fine.
Well, we'll do that. Now, you know her. You love her. She is elegant. She is fragrant. She is charming. She takes me to the best films in the history of the world, apart from some of them which really suck. Ladies and gentlemen, Chantal Rickards OBE.
Hello, boys. How are you?
You're very well, thank you. Hopefully you are as well.
No, I'm very well.
Okay, I'm glad we're all wearing our poppies. I'm glad we're all wearing
we're all wearing our poppies today. Quite right, too. I was just wondering where Phil had been, because we haven't...
we are, so we should.
Yes, I can tell you where I had been.
I had to fire him.
Oh yeah. No, regrettably, I had to jump on a meeting at midday that I wasn't given much choice over. So
these things happen.
And Rupert's okay? Everything all right with Rupert's okay, and Lachlan, everybody, they're all right. They're all okay.
Anyway, right.
I know. I did. When I was last in LA, and the wonderful Gloria Miller took me on a tour of Fox Studios. We went to have lunch in the canteen, which is an incredible 1930s. You'd know, Chantal. I was just in awe of it. Yeah. And at the next table was Lachlan, and I was trying not to stare. He didn't come over, oddly enough. Can you believe it? What a cheek. First of all, thank you. I loved the film. I know we can't review it, but I can say, I'm allowed to say what it is. I don't want to get you into any trouble, Chantal. So I went to see...
I feel like he says this every single week.
With Chantal's invitation. No, it's because we go to the cinema a lot, but I'm not allowed until they're released.
Yes, but that's fine. So don't even bother saying you've been to the cinema, because it's pointless, isn't it? You can't get anything out of it. I don't even know what you've been to see.
You're getting on my nerves now. You're getting on my nerves now. Your big poppy, you're showing off. No one's impressed.
Making up for lost time.
The new Michael Mann film. Yeah, I know. All about Ferrari. If you're a petrol head, I absolutely adored it. It got other people, I gather, weren't that keen, but I absolutely loved it. But if you're a petrol head and love 1950s, that whole era, set in Italy, I thought it was gorgeous. But there we are. I can say that. That's all right. That's not a review.
That's absolutely fine.
Can I mention one TV thing? Can I mention one TV thing before we start? Thank you for the detectives, the taking down of an OCG. Absolutely extraordinary. I binge watched it. Oh my God.
Yes.
Thank you for Bodies. That was amazing. And by pure chance, and then I'm going to shut the hell up.
And just to let people know, that was a TV
animation,
show as opposed to
a new animation series on Netflix. I'm just carrying on. I don't care. A new animation series on Netflix called Blue Eye Samurai. Blue Eye Samurai. It's rated 18.
No.
It is
an animated series.
Yes. It is one of the most extraordinary things. It's 8 episodes. I binged it over 2.5 nights. Absolutely stunning. Just stunning. Kenneth Branagh is one of the voices. It's set in Japan in the 1500s. I was gobsmacked by this show. The drawings, the animation, the brutality.
I take it that's why it's 18. Because it's graphic as opposed to
the characters. It was just fantastic.
Wow.
It's not lewd. It is very graphic. It is very it's graphic in its violence. It's graphic in its sex. It's graphic in the politics of it. But the way it looks, oh my God, it's stunning. Stunning. Blue Eye Samurai. Not for everybody, but I absolutely loved it.
Right. And is it an English production, or is it a production from the other part of the world with voiceovers in English?
Well, I couldn't really tell. It looked like the writers were American. It looked like a sort of an American production. It wasn't an English production, but the money spent on it, because the sheer animation and the drawing. I mean, some of it is, you could take them as stills. They're just so beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And the character, it's a deep thing. You know, if you're thinking the old days of cartoons like the Flintstones, well, there you go. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Can you imagine? I'd love it if they still made something like the Flintstones.
Well, I've got a little something for
based on The Honeymooners with Jackie Gleason.
Indeed. No, well, Phil, I've got something I think that you will love, and yeah, well, Russ and I will remember from our younger years, but you weren't around at the time. Although I think because you are a lover of all things comical and good writing, I think you will appreciate an animated series that I've found for this week, which is Dad's Army, the animated series.
What? No.
Oh my.
Exactly.
What?
And they found they found 5 radio scripts that had never been turned into television. And so they have animated the radio scripts.
Love it.
So the voices are the voices.
No,
because
how amazing is that?
They've still got them. And the animation is done. It's done in very, very clever sort of pencil drawings. So it's all sort of tones of grey. So it's not a sort of, it's not like the Flintstones in a colourful, hubbly-bubbly way. It is beautifully done. They honestly, the artists have absolutely captured the actors. And it's Dad's Army. And Dad's Army doesn't really need any explanation, except maybe for our listeners overseas who don't know that this was one of the seminal sitcoms from the BBC. Started, I think, in 1968, ran till 1977. They made 80 programs, and it was about the Home Guard, who were the military service left behind during the Second World War, who were men who didn't go to war. They didn't leave Great Britain, but they were the Home Guard who looked after our southern shores in the main. And it was a terrific sitcom. It did incredibly well. It's known by anybody British. It's part of the British furniture. But
and
this series,
my late grandfather's favourite sitcom. So.
Well, there you go. But the comedy still holds up. That's what's so interesting. The characters were so well done. And the comedy is sort of silly and nonsensical. And a lot of it is a comedy of errors and comedy of manners and all of those sorts of things. But it still absolutely works.
Well, I think it's sort of summed up by actually, the line in an episode, bear with me, of Fawlty Towers called The Germans. And right at the end, the finishing line on that episode is, however did they win? You watch Dad's Army and you kind of think, however did we win? Knowing full well that they obviously are not true to life. But still.
The beauty of it is, with Dad's Army, it would have, yes, they were bumbling and yes, they were incompetent, but underlying it all, and that is why Croft and Perry were such genius writers, is they were deeply brave and they were deeply patriotic, and they knew there was a genuine threat from 23 miles away where the Germans were massed. And despite all of that, under ridiculous odds and armed with, pitchforks in the best, and hose, and shovels sometimes, they were incredibly brave. And when the Americans tried to do that, when I was living in America, they tried to do Dad's Army. I don't know if you knew this. And of course, there was no real threat. Yeah. And it lasted, I saw the pilot show, and it never made past, I think they made one episode, had a big cast, and it was awful. It was absolutely awful. And the reason it was awful, because there was no genuine threat. The threat was from thousands of miles away, not 23 miles away. And it failed completely, and the Americans couldn't do it. It was a beautiful piece of writing. Where is it? Where can we find it?
Right. It is on what I used to call UK TV Gold, which is just gold for most people. So the UK TV channels sit on Virgin, they sit on Sky, and you'll also find them on the UK TV player, on their iPlayer. Right. So have a look. You'll find them somewhere. They're all over the UK. And I hope our overseas listeners and watchers can find them too, because especially the British ones, it's just lovely. It's just pure nostalgia. And it's definitely time, it's time for a cup of tea and a mince pie and sit down on Saturday afternoon and just binge watch them.
Oh, how lovely. How lovely. Yeah. Dad's Army, the animated series. What's next?
Yeah. So, well, I've got a bit of a theme of boxing. I am not a boxing fan. My father banned my brothers from doing boxing at school because he thought it was so violent and dangerous. But actually, there are 2 programs that have come out this week with a boxing theme. One is the new Louis Theroux series. Louis isn't a sort of traditional chat show host, but he does these long-form documentaries. I think we reviewed one last year that he did with Bear Grylls. And he goes into the lives of one person over the course of an hour and digs deep, in theory, from a sort of, he comes at it from different angles. And it isn't, he's not there with a list of questions. So a lot of it just flows quite easily. Anyway, this year he started with Anthony Joshua, world boxing champion, or has been twice the world boxing champion, who's an incredibly nice man in his early 30s, as bright as a button. Very interesting background. He grew up with his mum. I think he was a social worker in Watford. Still lives with his mum. God bless him, at 34, I think he is. 34, still lives with his mum. Good for him. And so he talks quite a lot about his background, and, that I think he had a pretty hard time growing up, to be honest. But he's become massively successful. And I think when you watch it, it will sort of break down all those prejudices we have about boxers just not being terribly bright. And he's incredibly aware that boxing is not a sport that gives back to the player, that ultimately you can beat your brains out. So some very interesting moments in it, and he comes across as a really thoughtful man. And I enjoyed it for that, and I was surprised that I enjoyed it. But I really watched it on the back.
Interestingly,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Interesting. Anthony Joshua, when I used to go to the gym a million years ago, and I stopped, be asked, and I moved, but he used to train in the local gym in Mill Hill. And he was, everyone would say he was just the most charming guy. They'd go up and say, "Hi, Anthony, well done," or "Good luck, on the fight," or whatever. And he was just lovely to everybody, and genuine. He wasn't faking it, genuine, which is always nice to hear.
Don't you think it's really sad that we have to be surprised when someone's like that? I know that we do have to, but it is sad that we have to be like that.
But also, what
do you remember, Chantal?
Yeah.
I was thinking of you so much the other day on Wednesday.
Should I just bow out now?
At a dinner party, I'm not going to say who it is. And I was stunned because you never swear, and you started to swear at the dinner party about someone that you'd worked with that I thought was a, quote, national treasure. And you said what this person was really like.
But we've made up since then, haven't we, Chances?
No, you're really, yeah, you and Phil. Yeah, right. Okay. And I was stunned because you heard the screaming match on the studio floor. And a new client of mine, who I am officiating at her brother's funeral in a couple of weeks, worked with this aforementioned person. Oh my God, were you ever right? Oh, I had no idea. I had no idea. And I'm saying this because Phil, hang on, Phil, you made the point. Isn't it terrible we have to say that somebody's nice? And there was someone who built their reputation of being the lovable, charming. What a monster. What an absolute monster behind the mask. So
well, I look
you're
forward
right,
to
Phil.
finding out who that
sad
is at
we
1
have to say someone's nice. Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah, I'll tell you. I was thinking, if only Chantal was sitting here. God damn.
No, well, I can appreciate you mentioning it because it's nice when other people have the same experience that I have, but clearly there are people who put on a very different face. And actually, the thing about Auntie Joshua, I was just going to say to you, Phil, that I thought was really interesting is he's not blingy in the way that I thought he'd be, full of sort of great big, gold jewelry and all of that sort of stuff. And he talked all about giving his money away to people that needed it. And to look at, he's incredibly empathic. And I just thought, you are such a superhero. I mean, anyway, watch the program, see what you think. It is on BBC Two, but on the BBC iPlayer. And it's under the new Louis Theroux series. But I'd watched that basically because I'd also watched the Sly Stallone documentary that's just come out on Netflix. So I think last month or the month before, we talked about the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger that was a sort of 3-4 part series that was brilliant. The Schwarzenegger one I thought was excellent. And this one is...
I can't bring myself to watch a documentary about one person.
It's fantastic. It was fantastic, Phil.
It's the same
weird.
With
I started to watch the Sly thing last night.
About 6 hours.
Well, I have no interest in the Beckhams whatsoever. They have no interest. I'm sure they're lovely, but I'm just not interested. Sly Stallone, one of my heroes. What a great show.
Well, Sly is the program is not as insightful, I don't think, although it does tell you about a man who had a very troubled upbringing. His mother was very distant. His father was violent towards him. He grew up partially in care. His mum, I think when he was growing up, was running a women's wrestling team. I mean, I think his whole sort of childhood and early life was chaotic. And he and his father take themselves off to Pennsylvania. His father starts buying horses. I didn't quite understand all of the thing about buying horses. But from the age of 13, Sly was an incredibly accomplished polo player. And you think, how extraordinary. But this all sort of plays into the range of this man. He is there is a lot to Sly Stallone, as opposed to just the sort of meathead actor that you think he is, who has been massively successful. He's one of only 2 actors who's been in a #1 movie in 6 different decades, and Harrison Ford is the other. So he's been successful writer, successful director, and clearly a very successful actor. But it is absolutely worth watching. And I think I may have told you years ago that I had met Jackie Stallone and had her on Through the Keyhole, and we went to her home in Venice, in near Santa Monica in California, and I filmed with her there. But what I didn't know, and I found out partially through watching Sly, is that she comes from a French background, but matched with a Ukrainian Jewish background. It wasn't anything about. And Sly Stallone's father was Italian. Anyway, it's an interesting doc. Even if you're not really a Sly Stallone fan, there's a lot about him, the human being, which I really like. That's what I get out of these documentaries, particularly.
Tell you what I got out of it,
which is fun.
Tell you what I got out of it. I haven't watched it all, but I watched quite a big chunk of it last night after Blue Eyes Samurai. And on behalf, from the men's radio station point of view, about success, about dealing with success, about dealing with failure, about having self-belief, about taking control of your life, about not allowing other people to say no to you. He's he had a terrible childhood. I mean, absolutely. He and his brother Frank, and they're very close, had an appalling upbringing. And it's that thing that it doesn't need to define you.
Absolutely.
You become your own person. You can become your own person. And I think that's really one of the mental health messages that I took from that. I was astounded by it. I didn't realize he had such a rough start. It was awful. Yeah. Plus, he was paralyzed. That's why he talks like that. When he was born, the muscles on the one side of his face didn't work. So he was born permanently with that kind of sneer. And that's why he speaks like that, because they're paralyzed from birth.
Wow.
So he's a heck of a guy. Heck of a guy.
No, You're right. He was a forceps baby, and it was a bit of a screw up when he was being delivered. So that was what happened. But his voice.
Chantal, it's very important to remember. You were saying you don't understand this notion of sort of buying horses, though. Right?
Yeah.
Never forget that people, technically speaking, can buy horses if they have shares in Prittstick.
Oh, really?
No, I'm joking, because of the way they melt the horses down.
That's disgusting.
What?
No, you've walked straight into his joke.
Really do that still?
You're not supposed to believe that. Of course, they don't do it. That's animal rights activists will be jumping all over this now. It's not true. They haven't done that for many years.
Well, yes, stop it. You've fallen at the first.
I've fallen at the first fence because I thought
nay.
Years ago.
Oh, there you go. That's very good, actually. That's 3 horse jokes on the trot. 4. Hey. Anyway.
Yes.
No, I was literally just about to pull you up short on that one, Phil, because I thought it was no longer used in print.
No, it's absolutely not. No, it's absolutely. It's a banned practice now, certainly in this country, anyway. So,
good stuff.
Were you
anyway?
I saw this great book. I was reading this great book on Super Glue the other day. I couldn't put it down.
Come on.
Right. So I'm gonna tell. I've got something for you, Russ, because I know you like a good foreign, nice international flavored TV series, and this one is a French series. Which don't get it confused with something that I think you have watched before and loved, which was called Spiral, which was a French cop drama. This is called Spiral of Lies. It is also a French police drama, if you like, but the lead character is a lawyer. And it's set in Biarritz, which, that sort of region of France I don't know at all, but it's incredibly beautiful from what you see on this. It's a 6-parter on Channel 4. It came out a few months ago, but it's definitely worth watching. And it's about a young woman in her 30s who's a lawyer who goes back to the small town that she grew up in, where there had been a serial killer 15 years earlier. But her own personal story gets played out right at the beginning when you see that as a young tearaway 19-year-old girl, she is in the home. She's broken in with her boyfriend into the home of somebody else. They're larking about at night. There is a dreadful fire, and then there is a murder. And the whole thing gets conflated. And suddenly this woman, 20 years later, comes back to Biarritz to uncover what has happened. And it's good. And all I can tell you is it's good. It's worth watching. She's a very good actress. She plays both roles, both the older girl in her 30s and the 19-year-old girl, and she absolutely plays it with aplomb. But it's a good, whodunit, what's happening, flashbacks from here and there, cleverly intercut, and it's worth watching. Called Spiral of Lies on Channel 4. So that's one for you, Russ, if you're still there. I think you are.
The problem with Russ's connection today is it's a bit disappointing. It's a bit mind the gap.
It is.
Are you with us, Russell?
There's a bit of sound delay, I think, Phil.
Anyway.
Oh, yes, he's there.
There you go. His thumbs up. I don't think we can hear him. We'll carry on regardless, shall we? But anyway, marvelous stuff. So there you go. Thank you very much indeed for that. Actually, speaking of which, I've just discovered this.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
And on that very note, he's gone. Anyway, can I just say that on that very note, there was actually a series I have just discovered on Disney Plus, which is actually on Star. Star, if you don't know how Disney Plus works, just to very quickly explain, is that Disney Plus the reason why it's called Plus is because it has several streaming services within it. So
correct.
You get obviously the Disney stuff, you get the Pixar as well, but you get other strands, including National Geographic and this other service, Star. And Marvel as well features in there as well. Star is sort of a really oddball collection of some of the best of American television. It's the only way I can describe it. Doesn't seem to be, from what I can see, any sort of common thread that links all of it together. But even so, one of these particular programs on Disney Plus is a sort of a weird sort of reenactment of what can... Okay, here's how I describe it. Think of, if you will, the love child of FBI Files and Made in Chelsea. So I know this sounds bonkers, okay, but hear me
Very
out.
bonkers.
So what you need to imagine that they have a setting of a sort of a reality setting of a bunch of FBI individuals or former FBI people who are criminologists in their own field. And they sit around a sort of table examining old FBI cases to see if their new technology can bring something else to light. Okay.
Wow.
But what they do is they look at archive footage and archive interviews and then analyze it in, like I said, this almost reality setting. It's quite curious, really. It's called The Lesson is Murder, right?
Okay.
And it's a former FBI agent who's now turned professor of criminology. She's sort of now training up the next generation of criminologists and sort of those experts. And it's a really sort of quite a bizarre concept that I didn't think there was much room for new type of TV anymore. I thought we'd seen everything, but I've really not seen anything like this before. So it's called The Lesson is Murder, and that's Disney Plus.
Okay, on the Star stream, as it were.
Yeah, on Star. Yeah.
All right, good. Well, I will look out for that. I haven't seen it, but it sounds like a new take on another bit of the crime genre, which seems to get bigger and bigger.
It really is. It's just a different take on crime genre. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. I think the ITV have also just brought out something about con men, which I'm going to start today. And I just from the title, I just think, that's really going to suck an awful lot of people in like me who really like to see, a story with a bit of retribution at the end of it.
Absolutely.
Is Russ back with us? He is.
Well, he's back with us.
Especially,
Are you in the room?
You're wonderful. Yeah. No, I'm here.
Oh, you are.
Am I ever in the room, Chantal? You've known me many years. Am I ever really there? Yes, of course. Of course.
Oh,
that's why I liked your show, The Detective Taking Down the OCG, because of the retribution at the end, kind of.
Yeah. Well, you should also watch The Met, which I mentioned last week, the BBC series about the Metropolitan Police, because you always it's filmed over such a long period that you get an end to a story, and there's nothing like actually finding out really what happens next.
I rather enjoyed the one about the pernickety detective. It's called Taking Down the OCD.
We'll let you get away with that, Phil. Others wouldn't.
Thanks. I appreciate your willingness to concede. And have we got any quick fire suggestions?
Yeah, very quick fire. One for the girls, really, because I don't think the guys are going to like this at all. It's the Colleen Rooney, the real Wagatha story.
Oh, no.
The real Wagatha story.
Dear.
Yeah, I don't think the boys will want to watch. It is on Disney Plus. It's
Disney Plus. Yeah. Oh dear.
1 hour.
Yes, flash up.
Already. I enjoyed it, but I'm not sure that everybody else will enjoy it. But I was completely obsessed with the Wagatha story, so it worked for me. And if you want something really easy, The Hotel Inspector is back on Channel 5 with Alex.
Oh, Alex Filippi. Yeah, very good. I didn't think they still made that, to be honest.
They do. Well, they're branching out. They're now doing, restaurants, not just hotels, and they're doing shops and places of interest to see if they can sort of, bring them back to life and get people coming through the front door. So they've extended it sideways, but it's good. If you like Alex and you'd like a makeover show, then this is a good one.
It would appear as though my mother is giving financial advice again with sound investments. She's saying, I wouldn't see that for £1 million. She's referring to the Colleen Rooney thing, of course. But I have to confess, Mother, if £1 million is in the offering, I'd make sure you watched that. Anyway.
Thought you might, Phil. Who knew Linda was so brutal? Chantal, thank you so much, as always, for your wonderful suggestions.
Always
great. Always. Thank you so much. And we will see you, God willing, next Friday. And that, ladies and gentlemen, in a nutshell, is it for yet another week here on The Daily Show. Phil, you're about to say something. You got that look. You got the look as though you're going to impart something. You had that sort of pensive, thoughtful look.
No, I just do my utmost to try and look intelligent. It doesn't work very well, you see. So I just sort of have to.
It was genius. No, it was genius. It was genius. Thank you, John. That's very, very kind of you, John Ryan, who who's an excellent all-round egg. Good show as always. Thanks, John. I really appreciate that. If you're going to Central London tomorrow,
how can an egg be round?
I'm not even going to go there. Yeah, he's a good egg. He's a good guy.
You said he's a good all-round egg, so I just anyway.
Well, sometimes you're too literal.
I am too literal. Can I just say very quickly, just a finishing note, that if you missed Mr. Kane's show on Sunday last week, you really did miss out. It was superb work. Bravo again. And thank you for a jolly good laugh.
Well, God only knows we need it these days. Everybody take care. We will be back on Monday, myself and Neil Longy Long. Phil, take care. Look after yourself, especially in these crazy times. Until we meet again on Monday, try and stay